December 21st, 1944. Near St. Vith, Belgium. The morning fog hangs heavy over the frozen hills of the Ardennes. A group of weary German soldiers, their gray uniforms stiff with frost, trudge down a muddy road under the watchful eyes of American MPs. Their boots crunch through a mix of snow and churned-up earth as the sound of idling engines and clattering pots drifts from a nearby American encampment. Lieutenant Hans Kramer, 24 years old and fresh from the shattered remnants of the 18th Volksgrenadier Division, lifts his head just enough to glance toward the noise. His lips are split from the cold, his stomach hollow from days of marching and hunger. Around him, his men, young, hollow-eyed conscripts and old veterans alike, move in silence. They expect the worst: starvation, filth, humiliation. That's what capture means on the Eastern Front. But this feels different. A U.S. soldier waved them to a halt near a row of olive-drab trucks. Another man, bundled in a thick parka with a patch reading Red Ball Express, shouts something in English. A few seconds later, the smell hits them, rich, bitter, and utterly alien to the battlefield. Coffee. Real coffee. The Americans are pouring steaming cups from metal urns, the liquid rising in curls of vapor into the cold air. Some GIs lean against jeeps, laughing, their rifles slung casually across their shoulders. One opens a small envelope, mail from home, and reads with a grin. Another unwraps a package from his mother, revealing cookies and a newspaper. Kramer's jaw tightens. He can't comprehend what he's seeing. The men who captured him hours ago, men still covered in mud and powder from the Battle of the Bulge, are drinking fresh coffee and reading mail from the States, as if the front line were a comfortable station back home. A private in a worn parka offers Kramer a tin cup of that dark liquid. "Here," he says simply. "Hot coffee." Kramer hesitates, then accepts. The warmth seeps through his gloves, and when he takes a cautious sip, the taste is overwhelming, sharp, bitter, alive. He closes his eyes. It has been months since he's tasted anything warm. Behind him, another German mutters in disbelief. "See Haben coffee? Here." "They have coffee? Here." The Americans laugh softly at the confusion, not mockingly, but almost in camaraderie. For them, it's normal. For the Germans, it's unimaginable. Nearby, trucks of the Red Ball Express rumble by, their canvas tops dusted with frost, their engines growling. Each carries supplies, fuel, food, ammunition, non-stop from Normandy to the front. To Kramer, it feels like the Americans have endless machines, endless energy, endless stuff. His own army had been surviving on half rations and promises. He watches as a GI sits on a crate marked U.S. Army rations, Type C, sipping his drink and writing a letter home, pen scratching over paper. Kramer can't help but stare. His own last letter home, written in a freezing barn weeks ago, had never been sent. There was no mail service left in the Reich's collapsing lines. For a moment, the prisoner forgets his shame and fear. He just stands there, holding the tin cup, staring into a world that seems impossible, a world where an army fights a war with warmth, food, and connection to home. A jeep passes by, its headlights cutting through the mist. A sergeant calls out to the column of prisoners, "Move him out." The Germans shuffle forward again, but the image burns into Kramer's mind. The laughter, the coffee, the letters from loved ones. It's a glimpse of an enemy who doesn't just fight to survive, but fights in comfort. As he marches, Kramer wonders how long an army like that can keep going. The answer, he suspects, is as long as it wants to. The prisoners are loaded into the back of a canvas-covered truck, its floor slick with mud and melting snow. The convoy moves slowly down the winding forest road, the sound of engines blending with the rhythmic rattle of metal chains. Through the flap in the canvas, Hans Kramer watches American trucks and half-tracks thunder past in the opposite direction, each one filled with crates, fuel drums, and men who look far too clean for a battlefield. He notices the markings, Red Ball Express. The name repeats across every passing vehicle. These weren't combat troops. They were drivers, mechanics, cooks, dispatchers, young black soldiers mostly, working around the clock to keep the front alive. Kramer studies them, puzzled. In his army, logistics meant horse carts and desperation. Here, it looks like an industry. Miles back at a muddy clearing near Spa, an American supply depot hums like a factory. Diesel fumes hang in the air, mixing with the tang of coffee and the crackle of bacon frying on a field stove. Portable kitchens, Meramite cans stacked and steaming, serve hot breakfast to the GIs before they roll out again. The efficiency is staggering. Everything runs on schedule, every meal accounted for. A sergeant from the Quartermaster Corps checks a clipboard as he walks the line of trucks. Coffee rations, check. Ammunition, check. Mail sacks, double-check those, boys. The fellas up front are waiting on letters from home. The drivers grin. They know the power of those letters. For the men fighting in foxholes from Bastogne to Aachen, the sound of the mail truck was like music. It meant someone still cared. Kramer's truck lurches to a halt as another convoy squeezes by. He catches a glimpse of a mobile post office trailer, an entire unit devoted to sorting mail under artillery skies. He can scarcely believe it. His own comrades hadn't received letters in months. Even generals complained about supplies. The contrast gnaws at him. In Germany, fuel was scarce, rail lines were bombed, and field kitchens had long since become fantasies. Soldiers scavenged what they could. But here, on the Allied side, even the most forward riflemen could expect a hot meal by nightfall and a cup of coffee before dawn. At a rest stop near the Arda River, the prisoners are given stew and bread, American rations again. Kramer sits by a barrel fire, watching the red ball trucks roar past through the dusk. The GIs chat easily, joking, lighting cigarettes. They don't look like conquerors. They look like men who know they're part of something unstoppable. He turns to one of his fellow prisoners, Oberstreiter Muller, who's gnawing at his bread with shaking hands. "We lost," Kramer murmurs quietly. "Not in battle, but in supply." Muller frowns, not understanding. Kramer points at the convoys. "Look at that. They fight with factories behind them. They fight with coffee and letters. They fight as if the war is an inconvenience, not survival." As night falls, the depot glows with floodlights. Forklifts load crates into waiting trucks, the American flag snapping in the wind above. The air smells of diesel and roasted beans. Somewhere, a radio plays Bing Crosby's "I'll Be Home for Christmas," the melody echoing through the mist. Kramer closes his eyes. He realizes that this organized chaos, this warmth in the middle of frozen war, is what victory looks like. January 2nd, 1945. Étal, Belgium. The war has turned bitter. Snow drapes the countryside in a suffocating silence, broken only by the distant growl of artillery. Inside a half-buried command post, the smell of coffee once again cuts through the cold, rich, dark, and somehow defiant. Corporal James Jimmy Hall from Ohio pours himself a steaming mug, leaning against the hood of a Jeep streaked with mud. His breath fogs in the air as he takes a long sip. Around him, men from the 26th Infantry Division shovel down scrambled eggs and powdered milk pancakes, served from a mobile field kitchen that rolled up just an hour ago. The cooks work fast, moving between stoves mounted on trailers, their breath misting over trays of food. Jimmy looks across the clearing, where a handful of German POWs stand under guard. Kramer among them. The lieutenant's face is pale beneath his cap, his eyes sunken but alert. He watches the scene with disbelief, the same way he did on the day of his capture. Unthinkable, isn't it? Jimmy says quietly to a fellow GI, "We're at the edge of hell and still got coffee." The other man chuckles. "Yeah, that's the army for you. We move mountains just to make sure a guy's got caffeine before he fights." It wasn't an exaggeration. Behind every cup poured in the freezing mud was an enormous machine at work, a web of depots, mechanics, engineers, and drivers pushing supplies forward from the Normandy beaches, across France, into the heart of the continent. The Red Ball Express never stopped. Day and night, convoys of 2.5-ton GMC trucks, nicknamed Deuce and a Halves, thundered down priority routes, hauling thousands of tons of food, fuel, and mail every 24 hours. At the front, soldiers called it magic. It wasn't magic. It was logistics. A young GI from Alabama strolls over Kramer and the other POWs. He holds out a half-empty pot of coffee, still steaming. "You fellas want some?" he asks, his tone friendly but firm. A few of the Germans nod hesitantly. Kramer doesn't at first, but then he steps forward. As the American pours, Kramer studies a man's uniform, the well-fitted jacket, the clean web gear, the abundance of supplies strapped to his belt. The contrast is almost painful. Kramer's own men had worn threadbare coats, their ammunition belts empty, their canteens long dry. He takes a coffee and speaks softly, his English halting. You get this every day? The GI grins. Pretty much. Sometimes we get donuts, too. Kramer looks down into the steaming cup, shaking his head in wonder. It is impossible. The American laughs lightly. Nah, it's America. The words hang in the air like a challenge, or perhaps a truth too simple to refute. For Kramer, it explains everything. The endless fuel, the warm meals, the letters from home. It wasn't just wealth or technology. It was an entire culture built on abundance and movement. As night falls, the convoy roars to life again. Headlights pierce the fog, illuminating the path forward. Always forward. The men climb aboard, their bellies full, their spirits high. Somewhere behind them, the German prisoners huddle around their cups, each sip a reminder what their own army could never give them: comfort, connection, and the quiet certainty that they mattered. And in that moment, Kramer realizes that the smell of coffee in the snow, the hum of engines in the dark, is how America fights its wars. Not with desperation, but with logistics and faith that every soldier, even at the edge of the world, deserves a taste of home. January 5th, 1945. Near Bastogne. The snow has turned gray, crusted with ash and diesel fumes. American trucks crawl like ants through the narrow forest roads. Chains clattering, engines grumbling, headlights cutting through the fog. Inside one of them, Corporal Jimmy Hall rides shotgun, cradling a dented thermos of coffee between his gloves. His unit has just delivered a load of mail and rations to a rifle company near the front, and the mood inside the cab is weary but proud. "Crazy thing, huh?" says the driver, a wiry man from Chicago named Lewis. "We haul coffee and letters into artillery fire. Whole army depends on us, and we ain't even the ones shooting." Jimmy grins faintly. "Without us, nobody's shooting, or eating, or writing home." The convoy halts near a small clearing where engineers are repairing a bridge blown apart by retreating Germans. The men step out, stretch their legs, and watch as the snow falls silently over the twisted girders. A male clerk in a jeep pulls up, carrying canvas sacks marked U.S. Army Postal Service. He whistles a tune as he sorts through the bundles. Within minutes, soldiers emerge from foxholes and tents, their faces lighting up as names are called. Johnson, from Detroit. Miller, from Brooklyn. 2 for Ramirez. The scene is almost surreal. Amid shellfire and ruin, laughter ripples through the camp as men tear open envelopes, their gloved fingers clumsy with excitement. Jimmy watches them, smiling. He knows the feeling. Each letter is a lifeline, a reminder that the world beyond this frozen hell still exists. The GIs share their mail, their food, even their coffee with anyone nearby. Americans, Belgians, sometimes even prisoners. On the far side of the clearing, Hans Kramer watches the scene unfold from behind a barbed wire enclosure. A U.S. guard, young, barely 20, offers him a folded newspaper, its headline in bold black letters: "Patton's Third Army relieves Bastogne." Kramer takes it silently. The paper smells faintly of ink and machine oil. He scans a photo on the front, American tanks breaking through the snow, infantry smiling beside them. Relief and efficiency. 2 words the German army no longer knew. As he reads, the clatter of dishes draws his attention. A field kitchen has been set up nearby, its stoves roaring. The cooks move quickly, dishing out hot stew and thick slices of bread. One of them, noticing the prisoner staring, shrugs and waves toward the pot. "They can have some too," he says. The gesture stuns Kramer. Food shared freely, no threats, no scorn. Just a belief that even a captured man should not go hungry. He accepts the bowl, the steam fogging his glasses. The stew tastes simple but rich. Beans, carrots, meat. Luxury, he thinks. He looks out at the Americans. Thousands of men sustained by an invisible empire, trucks, ships, factories, and workers back home. They aren't just soldiers. They're the sharp edge of an entire civilization mobilized for war. For the first time, Kramer begins to understand why Germany is losing. Not because the Americans are braver, but because they are supplied, connected, humanized. Every cup of coffee, every letter, every hot meal keeps them believing they can't lose. Later that night, under a canvas tent lit by a single lantern, Kramer sits with his back against the wall. Snow whispers outside. From across the camp, he can hear American voices singing softly, a tune drifting to the dark. Don't sit under the apple tree. He closes his eyes and listens. It sounds nothing like war. It sounds like home. January 10th, 1945. A temporary POW camp outside Liège, Belgium. The snow has begun to melt, turning the ground into a slush of mud and soot. Rows of tents stretch across the field, each one marked with white paint and guarded by MPs carrying M1 carbines. Inside the wire, German prisoners huddle in their coats, drying their clothes near barrel fires. Despite the bleakness, the camp hums with a strange calm. No shouting, no cruelty, just a rhythm of routine. Hans Kramer sits on an overturned ammunition crate, his hands wrapped around another tin cup of coffee. It has become a daily ritual now, one that still feels unreal. He can't quite decide if it's mercy or madness that his captors feed him so well. Around him, conversations murmur in German and broken English. Some of the prisoners debate the future of the war. Others whisper about the strange efficiency of their captors. A few still refuse to drink the Americans' coffee, calling it propaganda. But most, like Kramer, drink quietly, unable to deny what it symbolizes. Across the compound, Jimmy Hall is helping unload a red ball truck stacked with ration crates. He glances at the prisoners and catches sight of Kramer, who nods faintly. Over the last few days, they've exchanged small gestures, silent acknowledgments of shared fatigue, of mutual survival. Jimmy wipes his hands on his jacket and walks over. "Still can't believe it, huh?" he says with a half-smile. Kramer looks up, the corners of his mouth twitching. "You fight a war," he says in careful English, as if it were an office job. Jimmy laughs. "Guess we just like to keep things running on time." He crouches beside him. "You know, back home, my mom sends me socks every month. Fresh pair every few weeks. Out here, it's a small miracle." Kramer nods slowly. "For us, a miracle is bread." They sit in silence for a moment, the only sound the hiss of steam rising from a nearby pot. Jimmy sips his coffee, then adds quietly, "That's what wins wars, you know. Not just guns. The people back home. Every factory worker, every driver, every cook. They're all fighting too." Kramer stares into his cup. The reflection trembles with the faint ripples of his breath. "In Germany," he murmurs, "we were told the same. But the people back home, they were starving." The two men exchange a look, mutual recognition, maybe even pity. The war between them seems to fade, if only for an instant. Later that evening, a Red Cross officer visits the camp, distributing letters for prisoners. Kramer receives one, his first in nearly 3 months. The paper is creased and smudged, but the handwriting is unmistakable. His sister, writing from Frankfurt. She's alive. The letter ends with a single line, "Hans, stay strong. Someday this madness will end." He folds it carefully, sliding it into his coat pocket. For the first time in months, he feels something like hope, not for Germany's victory, but for life beyond the war. Outside the tent, the night is alive with a low rumble of trucks. Another convoy rolling east, headlights glinting off the snow. The Red Ball Express never sleeps. Each truck, each driver, carries with the promise that no man on the front will be forgotten. Kramer watches them go, the smell of diesel and coffee mixing in the cold air. He understands now. The American strength isn't just in their weapons or machines. It's in their belief that every soldier deserves warmth, every man deserves a letter, and every morning deserves a cup of coffee, even in the middle of hell. The lesson, he realizes, isn't about comfort. It's about conviction. He takes one last sip, savoring the heat, and whispers to himself, So this is how they win. Yendi,